So, hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar on how to get from MRICS to FRICS for women in surveying. You'll see this has got my company brand and logo and things on for Love Surveying, and that's because this is a workshop that I've run before. And rather than reinvent the wheel, I thought I'd do it again, but I haven't had time to do some women in surveying branded slides. So I'll probably do another version at some point, but sometimes we just need to get on with it. So this is a bit of a workshop that as I said, I've run before, and I've worked with a number of clients to get their fellowship. And for me, it's not really about getting the letters after your name. It's more about the journey that you have to get to that point. And very often we don't take the time to reflect on our careers and where we've got, what we're going to do. And the whole point of having a fellowship, I think, is then thinking, well, what's the point? Yes, it's about paying our ICS more money, but it's also about, well, what you're going to do with it. And there's a reason why we're surveyors, which is why I talk about the impact that we can make. So what I'm going to do through this session, 40 minutes-ish or so, I'll just take you through some slides, some thoughts, a way that you can approach this. I've got a couple examples that you can see, and if you sort of registered with us and part of our community, then I can send you a link on a Google Drive of some examples that other surveyors have kindly shared. So any questions, get in touch or drop them in the chat, but I hope you find this useful. So what we're going to cover with this is what you need to do to get your fellowship, how you can do it, and also who can help you. And you always want to be thinking about who can help me, not how can I do this alone. There's some kind of saying of, it takes a village to raise a child. And I don't know what the equivalent is of surveying, but we all need everybody's help to get there. And that's very much about what we do as surveyors and the whole community part that we have, because that makes a difference. We're all about people at the end of the day.
I think there's a reason why we're surveyors. And if you're going to go through this to get your fellowship, it's not just about reflecting on your career, but it's also future pacing as to, well, what you're going to do with it at the end of the day. What impact do you want to make with your profession and the kind of work that you do? And it's not very often, once we're qualified, that we get an opportunity to really reflect on our career and the things that we've done. What we're going to cover is what you need to do to get your fellowship, how you can do it, so the approach to it, but also then look at who could help you. And you can't do all of these things alone. As women, I think in particular, we're very, let's just go and do it the hard way because we can. Who can help you, not how can you do this alone? That's absolutely important. And just like, as we talk about, it takes a village to raise a child, there's some analogy and wording there for it takes a surveying community to raise a surveyor. And, we help people with their APC, and we should do exactly the same, for the rest of our career journey. So those are the things that we're going to cover today. There's a copy of these slides available for you, and there's the RICS Fellowship Applicant Guide on the slide you can link into here. RICS are looking at changing this, though. They're looking at improving it. So I think it's important that you make as much progress as you can. I'm sure there'll be a time scale for when they have a date. I don't know. It's likely to be next year, perhaps. If I hear anything, then I'll let people know. But so have a good look at the guide, but don't be scared. Set up an email file or folder. So you've got emails that you can just pop to one side, as you write notes and different things, put them all in one place so you've got them. And also keep a notebook or a journal just dedicated to your MRICS to FRICS journey. Sometimes there are different thoughts that come up, even triggers from past employers who are horrible, or people that you remember working with, but you can't remember their name, or different projects. It can be quite handy just to keep a little journal and reflect on your career so far. My own journey to FRICS, I qualified back in 2004 and I applied in 2019, just at the start of 2019. But I wasn't sure if I was a surveyor anymore. And that was because although I'd done a, residential inspecting properties on the tools kind of job, most of my career, in fact, had been dealing with defects and valuation claims. So more management and problem solving and the legal side of things. So I wasn't sure when I left my corporate job in 2018, am I a surveyor anymore? And I went down this journey. It was a period of reflection, but it helped me look at how far I had come, but also how much I then wanted to do going forward. And that's the most valuable thing I think that anyone can take out of this journey. So the RICS for ICS guide, the applicant guide, if you follow it, you will succeed. Everything you need to know is in there. You don't necessarily need to pay anybody to do this. I know some people do. I've coached people through it, not specifically just for that. I tend to do it as part of my other work and say, hey, get your fellowship in as well. So I approach it sort of a holistic way, if you like. But everything you need is in there. And if you follow it, you will get there. But the problem is we look at these things, don't we? And you flick through, and I know I certainly did. I flicked through and just saw something like, for example, been on TV or written a book. And I was on maternity leave thinking, yeah, right. I think that's ever going to happen. And it just totally put me off. And what we tend to do is just to hone in on things that we'd like to do maybe in the future or aspire to, and we're not there yet. And we just see all the negative rather than be able to pull out the positive things. But you get to choose your FRICS journey and make it a career opportunity. And I think that's really, really important. For some of you, you may have gaps in terms of the experience that you need. Well, you can plan what you're going to do going forward. You get to choose the bits that you put in that sort of represents you as a professional worthy of fellowship. You get to choose that. And so it's up to you whether you want to make this into an experience that you enjoy and use it as a reflective career opportunity rather than just sort of ticking the box and, making your way through it. There are 3 core principles at the heart of being an RICS fellow. And again, this is all in the guide. Acting to further the RICS and the profession. Acting for the benefit of a third party to reflect RICS's public interest mandate. And that's the Royal Charter that we have, which is there for the public advantage. And promoting RICS objectives and the profession. So this is, where you start to sort of become an ambassador for RICS and being proud to be in front of RICS, which I know is hard when there are lots of challenges with RICS as an organisation and the sectors different sectors we work in. The benefit of a third party, that is about the, acting in the interests of the public and promoting the objectives. RICS has some objectives. They change from time to time, but it is things like climate, what's going on globally. And so it's important to be alive and in tune with that and not necessarily off on your totally own agenda. So it's all about being aligned and supporting the institution and the whole purpose of it and going in that right direction. So when you're writing your application, it's important that you reflect and come back to some of those things and are they in alignment. When it comes to qualifying as a fellow, you'll need to show how your career experience demonstrates 4 out of 12 professional characteristics. And they sit within 4 categories. And you'll get confused with calling them categories and characteristics, and they'll all blur into one. Don't worry too much. You will get there. If you start looking at how it's all broken down first, you can get lost in it. But I want to talk to you about how you can approach it in a different way. So these are the 4 categories: champion, influencer, expert, and role model. And I'm just going to run through these. So what you need to do as a champion, it's about how you've gained recognition from an appropriate authority. So you may well be a member of another professional body. You've done things for RICS, so on committees, boards, regional boards, assessors, that kind of thing. As I said, other professional bodies that you're a member of, or market or industry recognition. So that could be, like you've won an award for something outside of residential surveying, but there's also not many awards that you can win unless you're doing the Matrix one. So getting that full recognition. But also this is where it sort of blurs into a little bit with role model and influencer if you've got quite a high profile or you've got a lot of followers on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. As an influencer, how you've influenced the way professionalism is perceived. So this is you being a leader, management, and talking about diversity inclusion. And that was a new one that was brought in just a year or so ago. It's quite recent. So leadership, and management, that might be quite easy to tick off if you work for corporate and you've got, large teams or large budgets or projects to manage. If you work for yourself, that makes it a bit harder, but it's not impossible because you are a leader in terms of you work for yourself. You're a manager in terms of managing a business, but you still have, different people that you work with and admin support and how you work within within your local community. So you can do that. It's just in a different context. And also it's not about big mega bucks budgets. It's not all about the money. It's about how you influenced and made a difference. And also I find for a lot of women, this could also be leadership and management outside of the surveying community. So, for me, I taught, and I've got my examples, you can see, I included, I think, being a school governor and chair of the local NCT group for a time, because that was the first opportunity I could get to have any kind of leadership or management roles. So, start to think wider as to what's possible. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, for some people, that's their role. But for all of you as women in surveying, you're part of that. You can choose to be part of it, make a stand for it, talk about some of these things, and that's you sharing and influencing others too. So nothing, no matter how small, don't disregard it. As an expert, how you've been verified as advancing, sharing, or interpreting knowledge. So this is where you've got qualifications. You might do teaching and get into dispute resolution. And for expert, they do have, you can contact RICS and they do have, like RICS qualifications, ones that they recognise, but it tends to be over and above, of being a surveyor, and you do something else. And teaching doesn't have to necessarily be in the classroom or universities. For me, I included an element of teaching. I'd only delivered a little bit, but when I looked at my career, I've actually been doing lots of business support for admin teams and things like that for many, many years. It just didn't come out, or initially I thought it wasn't teaching at the start, but it's the way that you get your expert advice across. Then you've got role model, how you've exceeded standards, benefiting clients, colleagues, or the public. And this is where you come into client care, operations in terms of how you run businesses, and society and environment. Client care, lots of people will use things like testimonials, but they're not looking for just a flat, here's my 5-star Google reviews. They're looking for a bit more behind it. And in context is really important there. Operations in terms of, managing systems, processes of any kind. And society and environment actually is quite broad and loose. And you can put all sorts of things in there, different things that you've worked on. So for me, as I was going through this in 2018, I did this virtual summit called Women in Surveying. And that's where that came in for me, because there wasn't the diversity and inclusion category which there is now. So how do you approach it? Where do you start? And you may have heard of a TED Talk by a chap called Simon Sinek, where he talks about start with why. I can share a link to that. It's worth watching if you've not come across it. And whilst it talks about business, it's a really good thing to reflect on why you are a surveyor. Why do you do what you do? Why is that? Because that's a real story that you can pull across to. So you can write all of these things down in your submission that you've done X, Y, and Z, but this is where you bring it to life, where it becomes relatable, a human element to it, emotion comes into it, and that's what brings a story to life. So I want you to think about that in terms of why you became a surveyor. And Simon Sinek talks about this golden circle, why, how, and what. And when it comes to what, we think about the products we sell, services offered, and your role at work. And we often describe ourselves as what we are. We're a surveyor. How we do it is the RICS way. We have codes of conduct, ethics, rules, standards, regulation, all those things. There's a way of being a surveyor which is different to being a non-RICS surveyor or a surveyor of a different organisation. And that is important in terms of then aligning ourselves with RICS. And the why is our purpose. Why do we do this? What inspired you to become a surveyor? And for me, I didn't really realise it until much later, but I'd, come from a council estate. My mum bought her council house, was advised not to get a home survey. It all went wrong, and so it planted the seed for that sort of injustice. And I ended up sort of being a surveyor, but then spending most of my career in, why do surveyors get it wrong? Why is the housing market operate the way it is? But I didn't realise that until I looked back. But sometimes you can just be really influenced by the things you see, the things you experience, where you start your early careers. But it's important that you reflect on that. So whilst you've got your notebook and journal, write some of those things down or take some time to think about it. Because what we talk about is, what Simon Sinek talks about is this golden circle in the human brain, of how we relate, make things relatable. And in the TED Talk, I don't want to spoil it for you, but he talks about the transformation of Apple. And Apple used to just make and turn computers and mobile phones out. Now, everybody who, I've got a mobile phone here, an Apple one, it's more than just a piece of tech. We know why everybody at Apple does what they does. We know do what they do. Sorry, we know how they do it, and we also know what they do, and that really tunes into this limbic part of our brain and brings it through to the neocortex, which then makes it all believable and relatable. This is where you start to bring things to life. So, and he talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and that is the secret sauce to your fellowship application, to applying for any role on any job, committee, board, whatever it is, and also going for any awards. And I've also recorded a podcast a year or so ago for, as was then, Young Surveyor of the Year. And I talk about this too. Very similar thing. It's getting over that why you do what you do. So when we then start to look at, well, how do you do what you do? So you understand to a degree why. So how do you do it? And the best thing I found is to start with a mind map. If you've never done a mind map, it's just a piece of paper. You start with you in the middle and you have ideas and different thoughts coming off. It's okay if you do it in a list. It's not prescriptive. There's no right or wrong on any of this, and I'm not checking your homework either. But starting with a mind map and thinking about what are you most proud of in your career. So not what you've done and what you've achieved and what your salary was and how many people you managed and your budgets. What are you most proud of? That brings you into the zone of the things that you feel emotionally connected with. And it also makes you feel good. And when you're positive, it's a lot easier to write about positive things and remember the people, the dates, the names, the places, and all of those things. So have a think about, work that has made you feel good about being a surveyor, people that you helped along the way, however small, things that you are passionate about. Who are these people from the past that you worked with on projects or, had coffee mornings with? Who was it? Contributions that you have made and clients that were really happy with you going above and beyond. And really think about those moments that make you feel proud. You are allowed to feel proud of your career. We don't always do this and celebrate it. So this is why I think going through this process is such an important tool for you all. And then what you're going to do is then cross-reference. So you've got your mind map and you map it over to these categories and characteristics rather than do it the other way around. Because if you start with flicking through the booklet, just like I did of, I haven't written a book or been in on TV, therefore I can't get my fellowship. But what you can do is look at all of these things and pop them over and start to do that, a cross-reference in whichever way works for you with Post-its or spreadsheets, whatever. And you're looking at to bring over and to bear in mind, how does it reflect these three core principles: acting to further the RICS and the profession, acting for the benefit of third parties to reflect RICS's public interest mandate, and promoting RICS objectives and the profession. And so, for example, one of the things I remember doing when I did this exercise is I ran a small business basics series of workshops for admin people in the corporate that I worked for, who were low salary, kind of girls that work in a call center or complaints team. And they had no idea about business, how the rest of the business ran. And I ran these sort of, workshops just to help them. But I also then talked about what it means to be a surveyor. And out of that group, more than half of them have then ended up being surveyors later on in life. So there's little things like that you can add on. But I'd totally forgotten about that until I did this exercise of what made me proud. So then it comes into who and collating your evidence. Who can help me? Not how can I do this? So list all of your favorite people that you work with now, that you've worked with in the past, that have mentored you, that you mentored and supported, people that inspire you. And Then you want to reach out to people and be visible and tell people that you're going for your fellowship. Notice their reaction, ask people for their advice and suggestions, but you don't need to take it all. Mention it in your annual review if you're an employer, so you've got some accountability. Use a hashtag like MRICS to FRICS and hashtag Women in Surveying. Share that you're supporting other women and update your LinkedIn profile too. And all of those people that you like or that inspire you, reach out and tell them, or notice how they come and then say, oh, well done you. Because they're the kind of people that you can get testimonials from, endorsements from, will give you really good suggestions, because you all work in different sectors and every surveyor is absolutely different. So what will work with for one won't necessarily work for another. But it's all part of that feel-good journey. And when we're feeling really nervous and we lack confidence to do this thing, to know that other people are supportive of us going on this journey can be really, really powerful. I mentioned supporting other women. We talk about, of those who are fellows, about 4% are women. The last number that I heard was 2021. It was actually 3.6, not 4%, the rounding up. And that was about 450 women. That is not a lot. So yes, it will have gone on a bit more. So it's important to pay it forward. And that's why at Women Surveying, we want to, it's not about a membership in a cliquey group. This is about how we can empower you and you can then empower others to make a change. And that's why we're sharing this stuff. So to have a think about that and the things that you can do. Then it comes back to mind the gap. And I mentioned about the gap. So if you find you do this cross-reference and you feel that there's some gaps, well, then you want to create a plan so you can fill them and do a gap analysis. So highlight where you feel most weak or have no experience and plan to go and get some, or ask in the Women in Surveying community or surveying community, where can you get this kind of experience? What suggestions do people have? Create a second mind map. What ideas do you have to plug that gap? Are you inspired to do something? Within Women in Surveying, if you want to organize an event or have a project or do something, particularly in terms of diversity and inclusion of a woman, we will support you where we can. We don't have funds. We're not, but we're relatively well connected. We've got a lot of enthusiasm. And if we don't know how to help you, then we'll probably know somebody who will. So you can use things like that to help you move forward. So reach out to your network to get help with the ideas. This who can help me, not how can I do it all. And set yourself a 12-month timetable to get these gaps filled. Now, when it comes to one of the questions we're often asked is, well, when can I apply for fellowship? The rules have been a bit woolly over the years. I always thought it was 5 years, and I would tell people it has to be 5 years. Apparently, it's about 3. But if it's less than 3, it goes to the UK and Ireland board for approval, and then goes through. And some people do get referred, they plug the gaps and then go through again. But I think you want to think about, what am I going to do with this? If I'm doing this just to get the letters and to do it the quickest, is that really upholding the values of RICS, what it means to be a surveyor, or are you just achieving things? If you're doing it just to achieve things, I think they've got bigger things that you need to really look at and reflect on. I think you want to have at least 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and to come up with a plan if you don't feel that you've got the experience. But I guarantee for most people, if you've got 5 years plus, you are pretty much on your way. You're just underestimating most of what you've done so far, and you're not able to put it into context in a submission like this. So most people I see are more than able to do this if they've got that kind of experience, for sure. When you've done all of that, and you've done that cross gap analysis, go back and challenge yourself, because you might think there's a gap, but some of us don't. And that's where you can use other women and peers, to say, hang on a minute, actually, that thing you did was pretty good. So it's not a big gap, it's actually a small gap. So go back and challenge yourself. This is why it's so important to be in that positive mindset and not a negative, oh, I can't do this and oh, I'm not good enough. You have to have that momentum all the way through, which is why I say start with the things that you're proud of. There are some easy wins that you can make. And I'm going to pause there for a second because my doorbell's going to ring and I said that would happen. So 1 minute. Okay, yeah, anyway. Hope to God I can edit this because that was my ironing lady. Right. So, easy wins. Become an APC assessor, counsellor, or mentor. Something with APC or RICS on there is really helpful. But you've got to do it too. It's not just sort of turn up once and that's it. It's got to be the commitment. Lionheart and become an ambassador. They are always looking for people to help and to support. Join a regional board, working group, and committee. That is really hard to do, not least because they're hard to find and to find the applications. But within Women in Surveying, we are going to start to do what we can to improve those relationships and to let you know when these vacancies and things come up and to help you with your applications if need be. But sometimes just asking in your network, how can I get involved? What is there? Contribute to an event, webinar, podcast, and doesn't necessarily need to be an RICS one, but there as an RICS member raises that visibility too. Improve your visibility on LinkedIn supporting RICS. Again, that's really hard when there's a lot of negativity out there about RICS. But you're not out there to defend an organisation. You're there to represent what RICS represents, in terms of what it means to be a surveyor, shaping the built and natural environment, those objectives I mentioned. And in terms of LinkedIn, there's lots that you can do. You don't have to be a serial poster. You don't have to be a social media expert or anything like that. But to have a good, solid profile is a good starting point. And actually, Lionheart have a webinar library and they should have some training on it too. So, and even if you Google it, you'll find some hints and tips. And, as I mentioned before, organize your own events or something online using your MRICS. So long as you're doing something that enables or helps others or for surveyors, just go for it. You can absolutely do these things for sure. And then it's a case of pulling all of these things together and collating your evidence. So asking for testimonials. Often people feel very embarrassed asking for testimonials because what if they say no? People promise to give testimonials, but it takes ages to send them through and they never get round to it. And I ask for testimonials, but what people send is rarely what I'm looking for. These are common things that I tend to hear. Why are testimonials so hard? Because they require us to think. And the more you can be prepared, the better. So the quickest way is to specifically tell them what you want them to say or comment on. Make it easy. It's in customer experience, we talk about customer ease. How easy is it for customers to do business with us and to work with us? It's the same as this. How easy is it for you to give me a testimonial? So tell them specifically what you want them to say or comment on. Bullet point the jobs, properties, projects as a helpful reminder. Get them to say what you did and how you yourself contributed. Reflect those 3 core values if need be and flatter them. It would be wonderful to have your endorsement. We worked on that project together. It was really inspirational and you made a difference. And, people want to feel good about contributing, and so the more that you can do that and engage with that, the better. I want to say specifically, it is not necessarily writing it word for word, but it is saying we worked on that project together, or do you remember back in whatever year it was? So it's giving them a bit of direction so they know what to say. But the other thing you can do is if someone hasn't got the time, but they do it on video or they verbalize it to you, you can go back to them and say, you remember we spoke about, and I've put this together. Would that be all right for you? Do you want to edit it? That's going to help them do it a lot quicker. So you can also screenshot, if there's customer testimonials and feedback and things like that. As I mentioned, drafting it or doing a quick phone call and Zoom and getting them to check and approve. They've got to be happy with it. Sometimes they do verify these things at RICS. So, it's got to be an honest entry at the end of the day. And then you've got to put it all together. Now, pulling it together, the Word document that you have that RICS has is an absolute fact. It's a lot of editing, dropping in text and all of those things. So I would copy the questions out, put it in your own documents, whether that's Google or Word or whatever, and then get it all ready and then drop it into the template. Ask for testimonials early because, as I said, people are a bit slow. You want to make it all easy to read. Put any keywords in bold. So anybody who's reading your entry for assessment, it stands out so that, all about ease. Ask yourself, does this impress me? Does it meet the 3 core principles? And how does it represent me being as an RICS ambassador? Those are the things that you want. What's the feeling that you get from it? And there's also then future pacing it. In terms of the gap analysis, you might find that, you're starting a project or a piece of work or a bit of training or something that's coming up later in the year. You don't have to wait for it all to be done. If you've got a lot of things going on, you can say, and next year I start, or this comes out next month. My book is published next month or whatever. But what it also shows is that your commitment to continue representing the RICS. It's not just the end of the journey. So have a think about what you're doing now, what's in the pipeline, and what do you aspire to do in the future. And so that creates, for the assessor's mind, all these things that you've done. You've understood your why, and they get a good sense of why you do what you do, and they can see what you're going to do with it in the future. And that's the way that impact all comes through. So I'm just going to show you an example of one. So if you can just bear with me while I pull it up on my screen. Here we go. There we go. Hopefully you can see that screen. So here's an example. The form hasn't really changed in years, but do make sure you've got the latest version. It does cost 250 quid to do the application. And what you have is your personal statement, which is about 500 words. And it does need to, I say, about a maximum of, they're quite strict on word count. Personal statement, current role, practices and ambitions, and where you want to be. Do this at the end. Although it's at the start for somebody reading it, I want you to have a look at it at the end, because I think you'll have a different perspective in trying to write this at the start than if you try to write it at the end of, when you've done this work. But things to notice, it's quite evenly spaced out, bullet points to make it easy read. It talks about, your employment history. Obviously, I've redacted this one, your academic achievements, and they don't have to be many, don't worry about that. Then you've got your characteristics. So in this one, service to RICS, this was characteristic 1. And, you have these examples to have a look at. But what's important is, rather than do a preamble of, so for this one, initially, I think it said something like, I qualified as a surveyor in 1999, and then I did this, and then I did that. And we changed it to say, when I qualified as a surveyor, it was the highlight. And as you write it, you want to put yourself in the story, and that, so that anybody reading it can see instantly. They know all about you. They can make some assumptions and understand. So it's thinking about putting yourself in the story straight away. This person here was an SME business owner. So, when it came to leadership and management and all of those things, as I mentioned before, it wasn't about big bucks, but also like in the future, this is what I'm doing, so it's telling a story each time. This was about management. Again, about it being easy read and bullet points. We did have some bold words put in to pop out, but the person on this one didn't want them in, so we took them out, but that was fine. They've then got their next one was client care. Again, it's all about it being easy read. And then operations. And this one was a chartered surveyor who actually helped other small businesses. He came up with a way of organizing his prop tech, for want of a better description. And then he went to small other firms and just said, look, I've done this. You go and do it too. So it was all about helping others. What he had then in terms of third-party evidence. So here he had a letter, and he just sort of put the page numbers on this one, emails from former clients, on this one, it was the testimonials. So, for some people, when I did mine, some of it was from screenshots. So I took screenshots of websites, because if you give them the link, sometimes that gets changed over time. So I did screenshots and sort of dropped them into here. This one was a simpler one to do. You've got all of the characteristics in there. Then you've got to have a referee. They need to be MRICS or FRICS. And the thing about finding a referee is to, when you do your mind map, is to think about somebody that you've worked with before or has been a supporter of you before who you can ask to do this. Unless I really know somebody, I don't do this, even with clients that I've worked with in the past. You really got to know somebody. I want to endorse them. And also, if you think about it, it's a pleasure for somebody to have seen your career go from here to here, and they're the person that then endorses you. And it means that they get to feel good about all of this as well, so don't rob them of that pleasure of being able to support you in your career. Then you've got to give your name, what would go on there. And then, this was the evidence for each of the characteristics. And it was sort of split in through there. I mean, obviously I've taken it out of this for the purposes of this session, but hopefully from that you'll get the idea. But we do have a link with other ones in that you can then go and have a look at. So let me just share my screen with you again. So some top tips for writing it. Don't waste time explaining. Put yourself in the situation. There's a lot of assumptions that they can make about you being a surveyor, the kind of work that you can do as well. So you don't need to preamble all of that. Use keywords. Make it easy for the assessor to mark. Make it a mix of description, numbers, and facts. There are some people who are very numbers, visual, auditory, all of those things. So make it easy and simple to read. That's not dumbing down, it's helping. Bullet points can actually fill a lot of information in there without the whole and assume context, without giving chapter and verse. Write with authority. You to get to this point, you are a professional who's done an awful lot of work. You write with authority, and don't name drop, because they don't look at that either. And you never know who's flavour of the month or not. It's not about who you're associated with. So a couple of frequently asked questions. How long does it take? Well, it depends. Mine took about 4.5 months to go through. Some people have heard in a fortnight. Some people have taken 6 months. It all depends on the availability they've got for people assessing. But hopefully they'll try and get it back to you as quickly as possible. How much does it cost? About 250 quid to do. And then the membership fee increases. And it depends on the time of the year. So if you're towards the end of the year, say in October, you won't pay any extra until January. But if it was, say, in March, then they'd probably ask you to pay a bit more. But who knows what will happen with membership fees. What format? It's in a Word document. So you fill out that Word template and then send it by email. So you have to be a bit careful about the size of it. I think in the end, mine, I sent through something like WeTransfer because it was so big, because I had all these screenshots in. But obviously just make sure you've got confirmation that they've got it. And how much third-party evidence? Don't overload it, but be strategic. A couple of good, really testimonials or examples are much better than reams and reams of everything that you've ever done. Do they check and verify the information? Yes, they do. They'll go and have a look. How will you get your results? This may well change in the future, but it's the most disappointing experience. You get an email through, and at some point with the next print run, you might get a certificate. When I got mine through, it said I have to find it actually. It said something like, this has now been approved. And so I had to email back and say, what's been approved? Like your fellowship. It was like, oh, as in like, is this real? They might have tightened it up since then. And I think there's a lot that they can do to celebrate it. And we will celebrate with you. But you do get an email through. And then for printing, you do get some kind of a certificate. We used to get, just to have it somewhere, a gold card, a membership gold card. And your digital one will probably be gold. Is there a party to celebrate? No. In 2019, we had the most number of women achieve fellowship ever in the 153 years or whatever. And they were pushed to have a bit of a celebration, and they didn't really invite women. It was a bit of a fair. But I would like to think that there is something that we can do to celebrate everybody's achievements. And do you know what? Even if there's not a get-together, I would love for you to just do something really nice for yourself. It doesn't have to be go out and buy yourself a new handbag or whatever, but just give yourself the time to say, actually, I did really well, and to do that self-reflection. And if you've got any queries with the RICS, they're relatively helpful if you email fellowship uk@rics.org, and they will help you where they can. Or, of course, you can ask within the Women in Surveying network. So I hope you found that helpful. I want you to think about how you're going to feel when you achieve your fellowship. Many of the women that I speak to, this is a huge confidence boost, and how you're seen by your peers and other professionals within the property sector is actually quite significant, more so perhaps than for men. And so, it is definitely worth doing. Whatever goes on with RICS and what people think. Actually, I think for women, this is a really good thing to go through to see where you are, what you've done with your career, how you're going to future pace it, give yourself a good, slap on the back for it, and then celebrate with others. I mean, that's what I got from it. And I hope you do too.